Rangatira mā, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Kathy Grant ahau. As Commissioner of the Southern District Health Board, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to welcome you all this evening. This is an exciting occasion for us, the opportunity for us to update you in relation to the new Dunedin Hospital. And so this is an exciting development for the DHB, for the city, and also for the district. So I'm joined this evening by Richard Thompson in the front row there, the Deputy Commissioner of the DHB, Chris Fleming, our Chief Executive, and most importantly, Pete Hodgson, who is the Chair of the Southern Partnership Group, the group appointed by the Minister to govern the rebuild of Dunedin Hospital. So this evening is our opportunity to tell you what we have been doing, where we are at, and what the next steps will be. And the timing of our engagement is at least in part linked with the release of the Master Site Plan. So this is a planning document released shortly before Christmas, the purpose of which is to demonstrate that all of the services that we will need can fit on the site and work intelligently together. It's certainly not the final shape or placement, but it does give us something of that idea. But the most important part of this evening's session is the opportunity for you to ask questions of us, matters of interest or concern to you, so I want to ensure that we leave plenty of time for that. So perhaps if Chris and I start the presentation this evening by painting a bigger picture for you. And that bigger picture tells us that it is not simply a matter of the DHB moving progressively from its existing buildings into new buildings as from 2023, and then addressing the issue of how to make those new buildings work. The building of this new hospital provides a catalyst for us to collectively reshape the delivery of health services in the lower part of the South Island, and this is an opportunity that we need to collectively grasp. The reporting and analysis that underpins the rebuild work to date has demonstrated the progressive growth in demand for hospital-based services, primarily on account of an ageing population. And so what we do know is that if we were to continue to deliver health services as we have in the past, we would need much more physical space than is presently planned. We would also need to enlarge our workforce significantly. So continuing to deliver health services as we have in the past is unsustainable. It's unsustainable in terms of physical space and the size of buildings. It's unsustainable in terms of our workforce. Where would that workforce come from? Given that workforce is potentially a challenge not only for this DHB, but for all DHBs in New Zealand. And it's unsustainable in terms of financial cost. So our planning for the new hospital reflects our focus on quality care and quality outcomes for our patients. It reflects a focus on primary and community care, on care being provided closer to home, on a district-wide network of care, including our rural providers, and a focus on hospital-based care being there when required, but focused on the sickest of our patients who need acute, resource-intensive care. So as a DHB, we cannot leave that reshaping of our services until the day we move into the new facilities. So we are presently working with all of our staff, looking at the future delivery of services and what that delivery might look like. What services can be delivered by primary and community care? What does a secondary component of individual services look like? And you will appreciate that those conversations are challenging. So our focus tonight is on the new hospital and those new buildings, and the importance of this project to the long-term delivery of health services in the region cannot be overstated. But the success of those new buildings is inextricably linked with the wider program of work being undertaken by the DHB. One cannot be successful without the other. And so, just before I invite Pete to share with us the work of the partnership group, I'll invite Chris Fleming to speak to you briefly about the DHB's program of work.
Thanks for that, Kathy. I've only got one slide, and we're going to leave Pete to talk about the hospital redevelopment. But my slide is kind of building on what Kathy has just talked about, that the most public change that is occurring over the next decade is indeed the rebuild of a brand new hospital. But our success of this hospital development is going to be dependent on how successful we are with the wider primary community strategy and the activity that goes forward. The new hospital is going to be bigger than the old hospital, but the new hospital is predicated on delivering more services closer to home in things that we are calling healthcare homes, and also in community health hubs. So healthcare homes, we announced the launch of our primary and community strategy last year. Healthcare homes are re-engineered primary care. We have already got, I think it's 21 out of the 82 practices across Southern DHB signed up and moving forward on the healthcare home model. That 21 practices though represents 40% of our population, the population that is enrolled with those GP practices. The second part though is the community health hubs, and we're about to start that process, including engaging with providers both within our hospital setting but also in our primary community and other social agencies about saying who wants to be involved in co-designing services that are going to be provided in the community health hub. Now, one of the fallacies or perhaps misconceptions about community health hubs is that in various pieces of information that's gone out, we have things that are called out-of-scope services for the rebuild. So a couple of the out-of-scope services that are that public have commented on, I want to just kind of clarify. We need to have a parking plan, regardless of what car parking facilities we build. We need a parking plan that is fit and effective for both our staff and also for the community that attend the hospital. Secondly, as a DHB, we've got a large workforce, and a lot of that workforce are female, and a lot of our female workforce are also have young children. We need a childcare plan. Whether or not there is a creche on the hospital site, we need a childcare plan that is accessible, is affordable, and is available for our workforce that work across quite significant hours of the day. Out-of-scope services are not the focus of community health hubs. What the community health hubs are is how should the members of the community access services like diabetes, like rheumatology, like respiratory. Why do you need to come to the hospital? Why can't we bring both primary and secondary services closer together into the community health hub setting, whilst reserving the hospital for those services that actually you need to be in the physical infrastructure and in the physical building. So there will be diabetes services in the hospital, there will be respiratory services in the hospital, but if you can access those services in a more appropriately timely way in the community, then that's what we need, that's what we want to do. And one of the things that, whilst a lot of people will focus on the bricks and mortar and the redevelopment in 2023 and 2028, I really encourage you to engage as a community in terms of how we shape and configure community health services as well, to make sure that we're not making people travel both within Dunedin and further abroad for services. So our strategy about developing the hospital, but equally the other components of our primary community strategy, they all have to be successful if we're going to end up with a world-class outcome when we open the new hospital progressively over the next decade. I'm going to now call on Pete to come and walk us through where we are today.
Kia ora tātou. Can everybody hear okay? This is my second meeting and I didn't pay much attention to the slides in the first meeting, so I need to do better. Could someone turn the slides over so that I... Oh, you know how to do this? Is that it? Yep. Okay, so... Great. That's one shot, one page from a thing called the master site plan. And a master site plan is the first of 5 stages of design. It's been completed. We've just begun the second stage of design, which is called concept design. And we will finish the concept design in September of this year for the little building. I don't know whether this thing points as well, but never mind.
With the
For
red.
the little building, September this year, the second stage of design will finish November this year for the second stage of design for the main or large building. So if you look at this thing, you can see there's already some information which is immediately apparent. St Andrew Street's going to become very important. There's a thing called the Interprofessional Learning Centre, which is where the university and the Polytechnic and the DHB interface. And it's an important interface. For those of you who understand, as I'm sure most of you do, that the link between tertiary education and health provision is at the core of what this city is. And that building is at the core of that interface, or will be. And we can talk a bit about it if you want to some more. There's something called future spaces. One of the future spaces will be when that thing there, the current oncology centre, which is quite a new facility, it was built in the early mid-90s, when that runs out of juice, and it's time to build new linear accelerators. Those are the machines that generate the material for radiotherapy. Then we will likely house those and all of their big heavy bunkers over in one of those orangey corners there. So that's give you some idea of what future spaces means. But importantly, there are 2 buildings, a little one and the big one. And the little one is going to be built ahead, of the big one. I think this slide really just we can pass over, but the building timetable got changed. It was announced in December of last year. And the context of the change is to get a little building that is open and functional and able to do day surgery by November 2023. And the rest of the little building doesn't quite get open in time, but is open in November 2024, and the big building is open in November 2028. Why is this? Because the pressures on the existing facilities are not going to last readily that long, and as every winter goes by, they become inexorably worse. And when one drills down to try and find out what's going on with ED or medical assessment and planning or ICU or day surgery or whatever it's to be, or asbestos or leakage or whatever it's to be. What comes out of that analysis time and again is that if we can get some day surgery done off-site in the new facility, we can make the last 5 years of the existing hospital a much more functional 5 years than it would otherwise be by making changes at the front door where ED and medical assessment and so on take place. So simplistically, that'll do for an analysis. There's a few things there about the nature of the design. I mean, you could add an endless number of attributes about what this hospital will be. When we have finished the second stage of design towards the end of this year, we begin the third stage, and that will require some rather serious architectural capability, almost certainly drawn in part from offshore. Stages 3, 4 and 5 are very, very substantial, and the contract to do that design is very, very substantial, and the process for doing that design is pretty substantial. And you need to think about that because there'll be points along that design process where your input will be needed or allowed for or whatever. There's a bit here about at the bottom about it being New Zealand's first digital hospital. We've got quite a lot of thinking to do about that, what that means and what the limits of that are, and also how much of that will be ready on opening day. I won't go on about it because it really, I want to stop talking soon enough for you to start questioning about the things that matter to you. But if you have a look at that 04 design, you can see the second phase, concept design. The first phase is finished, and then prelim developed in detail are the last 5 stages, and then construction and fit out and handover. Those things will be occurring quite substantially in parallel. We won't finish the detailed design of the little building before we put the foundations in. No chance of that. That would be and that would just take us too long. So we've got a bunch of things that we need to move in parallel, and the Gantt chart, if you know what a Gantt chart for doing that is to hand, and it's very elaborate, and it'll become more elaborate as time goes on. There are some key dates there for the opening, and the starting point where you will start to see some things happening on the ground in your town is next year. So there'll be some demolition going on. We will by then have completed the drilling to get a much better idea of what's under the ground. We will have begun what's called the groundworks, which is not necessarily the foundations, but seeing whether or not the earth is contaminated and dealing with it if it is. Getting some idea of where we're going to lay the pipes and laying a few of them, all of the horizontal infrastructure, all of that gets underway in 2020. So that's when the construction phase begins. The little building will soak up about 350 staff, and at the peak of its construction, and we're not terribly concerned about finding those 350 staff because they're in town already building the dental school and the animal research facility and the new performing arts facility and other things that are going on around town. In fact, the number of people down at the campus of the university right now is approximately 350. But the big building is going to take up about 900 or 950. It may be only 850 if we can get all the bathrooms made in Oamaru, if you see what I mean. But assuming that there's only a certain amount that can be modularised and it has to be mostly done in town, then it's about 900 or so people, tradies and labouring folk and truck drivers, and on it goes, for about 4 or 4.5 years before it slopes off towards completion. And so there'll be shoulders at either end of that. And we know, we've got a rough idea already about how many of each tradesman we need for each quarter from now until Q4 2028. We've got those rough figures already. There's a bunch of things that, and I might just say that finding those 900 or 950 people is the biggest problem that we face. If you want to know what is the most troubling thing for this bill, because there is endless number of things can go wrong, I can think of 100, that's at the top. There's a building in Christchurch being built now that's a little smaller than our main building, called their acute services block. It's not finished, and it should be finished by now. It is most, I think, of the workforce there are Filipino, and it ain't done. Not because they're Filipino, but because there's not enough of them. So that's kind of something that we're engaged with a lot, is how to address that issue of labour. I won't go into it now, but if you want to ask questions, I can. Quickly through those things. We might be running a new roading system. We're about to get consulting on that, and Jim's in town, Jim Harland. You'll remember him as the chief executive of the city from a few years ago. He now works, let's say he runs the New Zealand Transport Authority for the South Island, but it's lovely to see you back, Jim. He is one of many people who are part of a local advisory group that we have got running. There's a new district heating scheme idea. You know about the district heating scheme that exists for the current hospital, coal-fired predominantly. It fired up Cadbury's until recently. It fires up the central fire station. It fires up a significant part of the university. Do we run that new district heating scheme down George Street when they're digging it up to put in new sewage in a few years? And do we fire it using wood chips? And can we therefore decarbonise our city and take heat into hotels or into the ODT or wherever it's to be? And that's the subject of a feasibility study currently underway. And the deepening ties between the DHB and the university and the Polytechnic are a lot to do with new ways, people are thinking about new ways of teaching, using the interprofessional learning centre. And a good way to start understanding that, the way that I started to understand it, is to think about a thing called a simulation centre. A lot of health teaching uses simulation. So you might have a mannequin, you might have half a mock-up ward or a mock-up theatre, or you might have your patient sitting in a computer or two. And both undergraduates and postgraduates need that because people who are in the workforce need continuous professional development. And we are thinking that we will put the professional development unit alongside the simulation facilities needed by the med school or the dental school or the nursing school or the physiotherapy school, and then we will have a simulation centre that cannot be beat, so to speak, but we will also have an ability to turn out, we hope, more integrated, rounded, worldly health science graduates than might otherwise be the case. Quite a lot of thinking going on there. That's what that refers to. Am I done? That's me. I wasn't quite sure which way these slides went, but that's me. That's our big issue, is working out how much labour we need and how much of it can we home grow and how much of it must we import and where do we house them when we get them here. So a great deal of thought going into that. Again, further detail on request. And then the last bit reminds you that as we're going getting into serious design, there are parts of the design where where we will be wanting to formalise some interaction with citizenry across the region, and we will end up with a better hospital if we do that, and a worse one if we don't. So we're doing it not to be nice, but out of some form of self-interest in getting a better product. So that'll do, and thank you, and we can go to discussion. Are we sitting up there, do you think? Well, I think we'll go and sit up here, and you can go home or ask questions. Right, sorry.
Can I just comment on the we need you? In the processes moving forward, we're going to have a lot of things that are being called facilities and transformation groups. And some of these groups are going to need direct consumer input. How we lay out the clinical records department, as an example, probably doesn't need it. How we lay out the ED, how we lay out the paediatric unit, how we make sure that our facilities are accessible for people with all types of disabilities, we're going to need. And so therefore, there's going to be layers of your ability to be able to be involved. There's forums like this, which will be held on an ongoing basis. There'll be, I think Nicola is going to put at the back, or passing it around, if you want to be on an email group, then please feel free to put your name down. If you want to be potentially a part of being involved in the facilities and transformation groups, in terms of contributing to particular design aspects, we're going to facilitate that through the Community Health Council, and I think is there a place to signal that on there? And so please step forward. And in due course, we intend on having interactive displays at an appropriate venue so that people can come and periodically have a look at where things are. So there will be different layers of involvement. But open up to questions now.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It's very positive, and it's great to see that the show's on the road. But a hugely complex project, of course, with enormous diversity. My question really goes almost beyond your construction enterprise, recognising that the Southern District Health Board has a lot of fiscal challenges, and recognising that this is a capital works project worth $1.1 billion, we're told, are you giving consideration to how you might be treated in terms of a government capital charge regime, which, if not congenially constructed, could have a very adverse effect upon the long-term finances of the Southern District Health Board post the bringing into being of this splendid project?
Thanks for that question, and we should have introduced the ministry people sitting in the back seat, in the back, hiding away in the back there, John. Absolutely. And one of the refreshing things in the indicative business case, one of the refreshing things, I'm really committed as Chief Executive of this organisation to make sure that in 2028 we all know what we're getting into. And so the indicative business case did not promise fanciful gains. Yes, there are some operational efficiencies that will be generated from having new facilities that are contemporary. There will be better clinical outcomes, and they all contribute. But we are in discussions with the ministry about the ongoing fiscal arrangements, because we cannot fund a $1.4 billion project without it having a direct impact on service delivery, and there's no desire for that. So we're working through it. We don't have the solutions, but we are working actively for it.
Well, when having it on,
That's on. That's on.
where is a where is the existing model of the Dunedin Hospital years ago? And remember that model?
I don't, because I've...
The model
Yeah, I wasn't here years ago.
in the 1970s.
Yes, no, I don't.
Where is it now? It used to be in,
If we found it, we wouldn't use it.
come on,
If we found it, we wouldn't use it
they came up with photos of it.
because thinking and building moves on.
Yes.
And so if we found it, we would find it interesting and we would not use it. It just wouldn't have, it wouldn't be built of the right materials, it wouldn't be energy efficient, it wouldn't be anywhere near good enough.
I'm very interested in the models.
Okay,
you want
it.
Okay, well, look, perhaps
If we find it-
Nicola will take your name, and if we happen to find the model, we're happy to see what we can do.
I mean, some photos of it. I'm
Yep.
very interested in the architecture of the model and the
Okay.
plans.
Okay, cool.
And can you send me email?
Nicola will talk to you at the end.
There's a lady down the back. Do you mind just hanging on? Ma'am, gotcha.
Hi, what strategies have you got for engaging with younger members of the community? We saw last week some kids really activated in climate change, and they're the future generations of using the facility. What strategies are there to engage those groups?
If I can, let me have a go at it. If I can be a little blunt with you, our first interest in engaging with younger people is to talk to 16 and 17-year-olds and ask them whether or not they would like to consider a future in the trades, not as patients or people who are planning health services, but as people who might help build this thing. And I might just say a little more on that, if you don't mind. It's a very significant opportunity for young people to have this this hospital being built, because we will have to really break a leg, so to speak, to get enough labour coming forward, and that means that it's just not enough to go to final year of the secondary schools. We have to go to the employment programs around town. The site-safe activities behind the wire at the Milton Hilton have actually already begun, as we consider what can we do to secure some labour from that facility, or to put it in as a social positive, what can we do with this hospital to reduce our province's recidivism rate, say. There's the issue of women who tend not to build hospitals, but there's no particular reason why they shouldn't, and we need to be starting to think a little more imaginatively about that. And so all of those things mean that when I think of young people, I think of them in those terms. And the other thing that I think about when I think about young people, which is a sort of a bit pertinent now, is that we need to build a hospital which is as environmentally capable as is practicable, and that means paying quite careful attention to, let's say, energy efficiency. But you saw the word natural light there, which of course has an energy efficiency gain, but has clearly got a health gain as well. So we need to think around that stuff pretty well, and young people are quite good at that.
I think the other aspect is the Community Health Council. Recently, probably about 6 months ago, the Community Health Council recognised they didn't have a youth voice around that table. There's a very effective young student from the University of Otago, and it is one of the challenges around service planning and service design. A lot of the senior, I see John Chambers here in the audience, the wisdom that years of experience brings to our planning, but equally this hospital will be it'll be the youngest of our employees who will be the senior, who will be the John Chambers of the future. And so how do we get that model balanced right? That we value the experience and the knowledge from the lessons learned, but also recognise that we need to create a work environment for something that we haven't designed yet.
Yeah.
Sorry.
For the mental health area, that there be a part for mental health people if they come to hospital or read to get all married, and there's a part for mental health people to go to if they need to talk to someone in the hospital.
Yeah, look, yes, there will be. The redevelopment of mental health facilities is not in the scope of the rebuild, but that doesn't mean that they're planning about the presentation for mental health clients at the hospital. And secondly, you would have seen on the picture that Pete put up about future space, and one of the questions that we're asking at the moment is the mental health facilities that we have at the moment are not fit for purpose. The redevelopment of those facilities will be required over an extended period of time, and we're starting to think about the planning about where. But equally on mental health, there's probably a lot of services that we are providing now, which should be provided through appropriately resourced, appropriately configured NGOs out into the community, and not everything within a traditional hospital setting. So we're planning for it, but it's not directly included.
Regarding mental health and our young people and people in general, will we be able to contribute to the design of mental health services in the new hospital or not in the hospital? It wasn't clear what our emergency services will look like for people in mental distress. And the current co-design processes aren't working very well with the Southern DHB.
Yes, well look, I've been having conversations about the co-design processes with John McDonald as the chair of the Network Leadership Group, and I think we need to reshape and refocus it. And will there be the opportunity? That's the whole point of saying, hey, let's make sure we get people involved in sticking their hand up about wanting to be involved, because dependent on the different services, so for example the emergency department, people with all needs come to the emergency department, and so the opportunity to be able to be involved is there.
They need to grow, the budget's more.
Yep.
There you go.
Other questions over here?
I'm going to sign, and I want to give that to the interpreter. So, you're saying, do we want to be the first digital hospital? What exactly does that mean?
You can have it.
It depends who you are. So I think I shall be an outpatient, and I shall tell you what going to Dunedin Hospital means for me if I'm going there to be an outpatient. I go to my doctor, I say I've got a bung eye, the doctor says you need to go to the hospital to be looked at by the eye clinic, and I then maybe I'm able to book a place at the eye clinic from the GP's office then and there, just like I was booking a seat on an aeroplane to go to Christchurch.
That already happens though.
One moment. When I get...
So is it for communication or?
Yes, it's for communication. That's the example I'm giving you. But equally, you could use it to collect an awful lot of amount of data to do a lot of analysis to inform policy. But I wasn't being a policy maker, I was being an outpatient. And if I was being a nurse, I would give you a different story again. So when I get there as an outpatient, maybe I'm going to find that when my name is known, or maybe I'm even identified biometrically, for example, that the lift is called to take me to the right floor so I don't get lost. Who knows? Or that if the eye department's not working, I get a thing on my phone to say, don't bother turning up, they're running an hour late. Come in an hour. And I'm giving you those examples because they should be familiar to someone who travels on Air New Zealand. Or maybe with a bit of luck on a bus, depending on which bus line. But you know, Intercity will tell you if they're running late. So that's why I'm giving you that example, because it should be a little bit familiar, but it doesn't happen in health very much. Was that okay?
Okay. Yes, I know you're using more AI, aren't you? That new technology to do stuff in there, but we all go to the GP and then they refer us to the hospital, so that's not going to change.
Well, I sat down with a woman this morning who said she had had 6 letters from the eye department. That strikes me as 6 too many.
Nigel, you could give a clinical perspective on.
I'm Nigel Miller, Chief Medical Officer. I'll speak very briefly. Everything in this hospital with electricity in may need to be part of the network. We need to first build the infrastructure so everything can be connected. That's the first thing, to give us opportunities into the future, not just do the things, the little bits we can see, to create a framework for us to come up and take up the latest ideas. For Pete's eye, of course, he would have taken a picture of it himself and sent it to his GP, who would have sent it to the hospital. So when he arrived, if they thought he had to go, would have known what he needed and had it ready for him. Or for the person who's in hospital, we know what they need today, we can predict what they'll need tomorrow, the day after, and the day after, and we can make sure we have those resources aligned and take away the wasted time that anyone who's been in the hospital will be familiar with, in order to promote rapid treatment in a timely fashion to help people recover quickly and avoid complications. We also will have all the data we collect as part of care, so we can understand how to improve that. We can also understand how to improve the care we provide, so we know what works and what doesn't work. That's a little bit of a digital hospital. There will be things we haven't thought of, and if you think, how could that be? Well, 12 years ago, the smartphone didn't exist. So we need to build a hospital that is in that level of uncertainty, because when it gets to 10 years' time, or 9 years' time, when we open the big block, I can't predict what technology we'll need to use in it, but we'll need to make sure we've got the right infrastructure, wires, cables, all those connections so we can do that.
Can we have the original plan up so I can actually see and you can actually point to us
Okay,
what's
well,
being built?
Yep, we'll come back to that in a second. The lady in the back. Sorry.
My question relates to the construction workforce that will be required for this project, which you said is one of New Zealand's biggest infrastructure projects. Firstly, will there be a contracting clause to ensure the main contractor has a MECA, which is a multi-employer collective agreement? So you talked about the pressures of a massive workforce. Will there be a collective bargaining agreement or a clause to ensure the contractor has a collective bargaining agreement?
And did I hear you say MECA?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, there's no decision taken on whether a MECA will be part of the deal.
Okay.
I can tell you a little bit about the main contract. The first thing is that it won't be let for quite a long time. So there's quite a lot of room and time for debate about what will be in the contract and what won't. The second is that we've got we've got an issue at the moment, which is that our construction companies are falling over, and at least some of the work will be done by small or medium or even large New Zealand construction companies, even if the main building has as a main contractor some company that is out of town, quite possibly Australian. So we do know that we're going to have to be careful with a situation that's occurred up and down the country in recent times, which is halfway through getting the building built, the contractor goes bung. Because then you've got no contractor and half a hospital, which is not very helpful. And that leads us to thinking around moving towards more of alliance contracting as opposed to a sort of a straightforward, take it or leave it, here's your penalty clause, if you're late, it'll cost you too bad. That's what's killed Fletcher's and other companies. There's a bunch of issues around health and safety, which I'll just say they exist. You can't begin to get into those. They're very considerable. And then there's a bunch of issues around the quality of the build, which is not what your question's about, I know, which then raises the issue about whether or not that contractor should be required to be the same outfit that does that's held, continues for a further 10 years to do the maintenance, which would have a fair bit to do about the quality of the job. So all of those things are in the thinking, and mostly there's a question about where would the workforce come from. And when you head down there, I start to answer your question with these remarks. The idea of social contracting, it's not a term that's used widely in New Zealand, but it's starting to gain some credence, refers to more than the actual building. It says to the contractor, we are very interested in your price, bet your bottom dollar we are. We're not going to be, you're not going to ride roughshod over us here. We need to know what your costs are. But we want to get some idea of what you bring to the table other than an ability to build a hospital. And in particular, when we start thinking through the things that you can bring other than a building, we're thinking about your ability to train, maintain a cadre of well-trained local people. Now, if you're Australian and you're the ones who are looking to get the big build contract, you're going to have difficulty training in Dunedin because you have no footprint here. So we're beginning the conversations. They'll begin in Dunedin, and then we'll go to Auckland, and then we'll go to Sydney to begin the conversations with those folk to say, would you start to think around, if you're serious about this build, you may want to start thinking around having a relationship with some of the local chippies or some of the local electricians to start training some of those folks. Still haven't got to Mecca, and I won't. We haven't, I'm not going to give you a commitment to a Mecca. But are you starting to feel the idea that the contracting is going to be quite complicated and quite multifaceted and a little bit less take it and leave it than it is these days?
I think that because I've spent 10 years in Australia, I could see a lot of large construction sites got their workforce by having big collective bargain agreements, whether they were with the unions or whether they were with, mostly always with the unions with enterprise bargain agreements. Yep. They never had any problems with getting their staff to go to remote areas or that sort of thing. If you want qualified tradespeople to come to Dunedin or to stay in Dunedin, you have to think about that collective workforce.
Yeah. So I understand what you're saying. You're talking to a person who was a Labour Member of Parliament. That fellow there used to be the Minister of Labour. So
I'm not going to push their political thing.
I know.
Food for thought.
I'm just letting you know that we get it. but I'm not giving you the undertaking because I'm not entitled to.
The lady, and then I'll come back to you. Just commenting to yourself. Just commenting though, so through the conversations, Pete talked about the little building and the big building. The little building on a Dunedin standard is actually a big building, and the big building is a huge building. So that little building is 5 stories high.
Five. Okay, so what's the existing one at the moment then?
The existing one is, no, the existing wood block is 9.
You can probably get to 10 if
And the acute building, the inpatient building is somewhere between 8 or 9 at the moment.
That really large block's going to be about 8 or 9?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell me does that start where Cadbury's is? That's the end of it? Can you just point that out, please? Right,
Cadbury's block.
That big block there. Okay.
Cadbury's block, Wilson's block.
Right, but as a staff member,
except the old,
I used to work at the hospital and I know you're on your feet the whole time. If you have doctors that actually have patients out lying in another area, why the hell have you got such a long, let's now you have to walk a mile. Their time's really precious. Why can you not just go up a little bit more rather than out and use that ground for car space, because Dunedin's got absolutely none, and trees, and make it beautiful instead of having ugly big concrete blocks. Now I know that Friends building is perfect. It was built by the Ministry of Works from the 1970s. Over 50 years old, it's still standing. It's got really good bones. My father said it's been through many earthquakes. It hasn't moved. Good bones, okay? So if it's not broke, don't fix it. Fix the inside of it a little bit like you're doing. There's been millions already. New Kids Hospital, and you want to be trying to do, you're doing all that stuff. That's all going to be what for? I know you're going to use it while the other one's being built, but do we need such a monstrosity? Is this city going to increase by about 100,000 people? Looking at how many beds is that going to take?
Right, let me try and answer your question because now you've given me one. 400.
How many beds?
400.
Okay, how many beds are existing at the moment?
350.
So another 100 for that huge
No, I don't think that's another 100. I think it's another 50.
Another 50 for that huge block of land there, and you've got how many in that little space?
Let me just give you some figures since you're
Yes.
needing some. This thing here is about 100,000 square
it's a lot of
metres.
walking space, I tell you.
Please let me finish my sentence.
Yes, I know, but you've got to be realistic.
You ready? This area here is about 100,000 square metres.
Wow.
The hospital that it's replacing is about 89, isn't it, 1,000 square metres. So it is a comparable building. Its height is comparable.
I still think we could go further up than further up.
Yep,
That's
we
my
could go
opinion.
further up. Two things would happen. The first is that we would start shading ourselves. The second is we would start shading the historic precinct of the city. And the third thing is that we would stuff up quite a lot of the so-called hot floors. I'm going to get out of my depth here, where we do need to have a floor plate that's this big or big enough so that when someone is moving quickly from maybe from ED to radiology or something, that they don't need to go up in the lift.
The other end of it.
So I'm
Other
just
end of the city,
trying
is
to
it?
give you some sort of an answer here. I'm not sure whether you can hear any of it, but there we go.
and in terms of the design and the layout, the hot floor areas, to give you an example, at the moment, the theatres, if you take the theatre configuration, all the space in the theatre, and it works out about 280 square metres per theatre space, that's the hallways and everything. Contemporary hospital builds, in terms of the extent of equipment, the extent of activities that now occur in the theatres, the contemporary build is about 450. At the moment, our day surgical theatres are completely ineffective because the size and the scale of them means we can't use them. The other bit around the design is about attempting to keep creating that hot floor layout to allow the appropriate co-location. ED wants to be close to radiology, which wants good access to theatres and ICU. but at the same time minimising the amount of travel, and that's why you see the ward blocks not running the link for that in the towers going up from them. So most contemporary hospital builds now have podiums on the bottom, which is where you do need large space, and then the ward blocks are more compact. John.
Yeah, thanks. I'd like to ask quite a specific question about funding, but I'll get to it as soon as quickly as I can. But I suppose these meetings are all about getting across messages. And I must admit, I was a bit taken aback by a number of times the Commissioner said unsustainable in her preamble. It was quite a number of times. It just made me a little bit nervous as to what's going to be sustainable moving forward. Because a lot of things seem to be unsustainable. And then in your preamble, Chris, you talked about things being out of scope and things like that. And my specific question is that this $1.4 billion is going to build a nice facility, but is it going to be able to fit in all the health services that we need? And perhaps some of those are going to be provided these other things, these community hubs. Now, these community hubs are not in the scope of this project. The $1.4 billion is not for those community hubs. So if you're required to have services in community hubs, you're going to have to find the money to build them. And you may have to even go into some sort of, who's going to finance the building of these community hubs, who's going to pay for it all? But these are not in the scope of this project. And my concern is that how is all this going to be paid for? And could things be problematic?
To start with, the financial implications of using community health hubs are in the financials of this business case. The Crown, the DHB are not going to be the capital investors in the community health hubs, but we are going to be tenants in the community health hubs. And I'm already talking to two large players who have good social conscience and social outlook to be the investors in the facility. So whilst it's outside the scope of the rebuild, to make the rebuild work, the delivery, and in fact Pete asks me quite regularly what are the next steps on the community health hub pathways. So I'm entirely confident, and having been in two other DHBs where I think we've kind of developed many health hubs, finding investors is relatively straightforward.
But these investors are not charity, they're looking for return on their investment for profit.
Depends on who the investors are. We're going to be encouraging people to come forward.
Who's going to pay the bill?
Yep.
And what about things that fall outside the medical model, such as a spiritual centre? Like at the moment in Christchurch, the feeling for the chapel, whatever, is absolutely crucial.
Yep.
Is there going to be a large enough place here so it can be an interfaith space?
It's absolutely in the scope of the rebuild, in the schedule of accommodation. There is absolutely a multi-faith centre, and probably the timing of your question is very appropriate given what's been happening recently. So it is absolutely in there.
Thank you.
Good evening. Right Honourable Pete Hodgson, Kathy Grant and Chris Fleming. Kia kaha. Dunedin Hospital, public hospital, I've been in just for 1 week as an acute stroke patient this week. And I said to an orderly, this place is as good as Shortland Street. And he joked to me, yes, but we don't have as many murders. The church lady said, or as many love affairs. But nevertheless, Dunedin Public Hospital is the pulse and the heart of Dunedin, with the nicest nurses and doctors you can imagine. I can vouch for my uncle and aunt being one. Dunedin is a public hospital I like to regard as a temple that should have both the beauty of holiness and the holiness of beauty. So, as I suggested in the ODT, why not build a temple of Dunedin Public Hospital of Health and Healthcare in the House of Pain and turn Carisbrook and the railway workshops into a sunny hospital with plenty of space, with no parking problems or motorway crashes. The med school and polytech students can move, but old people find it hard to cross a motorway, if you don't mind me suggesting.
That ship has sailed. It sailed with the election.
Yes.
So there had been some discussions about whether it should be in a central city area or it should be at Wakaru, or at Hillside, or Carisbrook, or Mosgiel, and on it went. And there was a commitment undertaken by the then leader of the opposition, Jacinda Ardern, that it would be built between the current hospital and the Octagon, that it would be built using taxpayers' money, not a public-private partnership, and that it would be built, and that construction would begin by the time of the next election in 2020. So that was when that issue died, because she was then elected and so on. But there's a really important reason why she said that, and it is this. It's not necessarily that building, but it's the fact that the essence of the Dunedin economy is the interaction between tertiary health education and the provision of health services. And if you were to take the hospital away from the med school, you would, or the nursing school, or the other schools, let's go through 6 of them, you would damage Dunedin irreparably. That's the best answer I can give you.
Where's the helicopter pad?
Where is it?
On this, on the chopper.
Oh, well, this is called block and stacking. This is not an advanced design. It will be a helicopter pad.
It'll be on top of the inpatient acute building, which is where all the...
How many, 1 or 2 this time? We need 2 in some cases with today injuries.
We're not going to have a working bee after it's finished.
I've got a question down back there.
In light of recent events and going back to the earthquake where Dunedin helped pick up and provide services for Christchurch, what capacity is there for a mass incident? Is that considered in the plans? Do we have capacity to actually help other people in other places in our hospital?
Given that Nigel lived through the earthquakes in Christchurch, perhaps you can answer, Nigel.
Well, dealing with a really massive incident changes everything. So you change the way you use the hospital. So you start by designing the emergency department so it can cope with some of that, but it can't cope with everything that happens in a big disaster. Not possible. And then you design the hospital so it withstands a disaster. So it's a design of the building so it's stable. It's going to be usable after a major earthquake, and then you have a way of working the place so you can readjust its work when you have a major disaster. It's quite interesting, having experienced the earthquakes in Christchurch. A lot of people in hospital suddenly feel a lot better and want to leave, so you suddenly find you've got space. Turns out we've got lots of clinical people. That's how Christchurch got through last Friday. Because when you add up all the people who work across the city in various ways, and when you bring together, you've got a lot of people. So that they were totally self-sufficient on Friday, and largely self-sufficient to begin with in the earthquake, until they started moving out the intensive care patients. So we have to have pathways, so lots of people come with major injuries, they can be stabilized and treated, taken to our intensive care unit, and then if necessary moved on by helicopter to other places. So you can't cover all the health needs for a massive disaster in one spot, but you can design a way to maximize the effectiveness of what you've got, particularly for things like a pandemic. You have to design the hospital so if you have a lot of people with an infectious condition, you can stream them through one part of it. But the biggest harm in a big outbreak is actually to people who've got other things, because their treatment gets blocked, so you have to make sure you can stream them another way in the hospital. All of that will be part of the the next phases of design to make sure we've covered them as best we can, because you can't build it for every possible contingency.
Thanks. I'm looking at this building and where it's been moved to, and I'm thinking of the Dunedin spatial plan and our intensification of the city. And there, looking at the main trunk line running down through there, and obviously the state highway running in the area as well. How much consideration has been given to the transport modes as it relates to people from outlying sites getting into the city? And I noticed you said parking spaces. Are we talking about any other mechanism of movement in and out? Because as Dunedin gets more intensified, the ability to handle single-use motor vehicles in the centre of town is going to be a major issue. And just before Jim does set up, Jim does a great job of service management, but he doesn't get to determine how big the checks are.
Right, Jim, you told me you could.
A good series of questions, and I guess if we look at the sustainability of transport, it does mean we all need to get on bikes, we need to use buses, as well as occasionally we do need to use cars. So we've been working with the City Council and the Regional Council to look at just how we're going to get people in and out of the hospital, but also you heard comment about George Street potentially changing. You've also probably seen Harbourside redevelopment. So any changes that you might make to the one-way pier here will have a knock-on effect. So we've got quite a bit of work to do, and later this year, by mid-2020, we need to have made some decisions on exactly how we're going to rearrange the transport within the centre of Dunedin, not just to suit the hospital, but also to suit other things that are happening, because you can't do the hospital in isolation. So the one-way pairs exist at the moment. There is an option to potentially put them into two-way street systems that assists getting across the street to some extent, but it also has some efficiency losses and so on. So we're going to be working through a very extensive consultation process and analysis around those things, but we will also be very much including cycling, walking and bus access. Later this week we're opening a bus exchange. So that happens to be really well placed for people who want to catch a bus to get access to the hospital. So there are no final decisions on this. We'll be working with the hospital designers to ensure that there are multiple forms of access transport-wise for the city, and that it fits to the city's future as well. In terms of the check issue, we run a national user pay system. So all the fuel excise duty and the when you fill your car up, 60 odd cents a litre comes into a pot. It has to go back into transport, and then that's prioritised nationally. So at the moment, the money for these kind of works are over committed. But by the time we get to needing money, which will be in a few years' time, fingers crossed there'll be the cash there to make it happen.
So I just want to follow up with one last sort of observation question. Where the energy centre is now identified, have we thought about an intercity transport regional hub and a mode transport switch area at that point? Because I know that that's effectively your land, but what's the level of communication? Well, I kind of know what the level of communication has been with the city at this point, discussing whether or not there could be something done there. And that particular spot, we've got the energy centre for moving people in and out of the city more efficiently.
Jim, I also head up a thing called the Local Advisory Group.
Yeah.
It's got the city on it.
It's got David.
It's got the mayor. It's got Sue Bidrose. It's got David Benson Pope.
So what
That's who it's got on it.
has been given to that? Yeah, so my
Hang on, give you an answer. The Regional Council is on it, NZTA is on it, and a whole lot of other folk.
Okay.
Nobody's raised it. So why don't you raise it with them, and they can bring it to the meeting and we can start chewing it around, no problem.
Okay, well, you've heard me raise it.
Yeah,
I will raise it with them, but
I haven't heard it, so
it's news to us.
And then we'll come to you. But you've got a bus hub brochure in your hands, right?
Well, just a quick question. What's going to happen to the older hospital?
That hasn't been determined yet, and the conversations about long-term master site planning, because of course, the trade-off is: do we retain the land? What do we use it for? Some of the buildings, like the ward block, most likely has another useful life if it can be emptied and then repurposed. The difficulty of the ward block is it is so complex to try to upgrade while it's in use. And then the question of mental health and other further service development. So that'll be questions in years to come. Hasn't been decided yet. Can we just go to the chap in the back there first, and then we'll come to you. And then.
So building a new anything, the advantage is implementing the latest. So what have you thought about or done in terms of implementing latest in medical technology, medical services that is catered for the 21st century? And can you name a few of them? Clinical sequencing is one of them.
At the moment, we haven't made any specific plans for anything drastically new. We can see that some of our theatres will need to be combined with imaging. So you can do imaging, so you can do imaging, X-ray, MRI, and so on in the theatre. We'll explore that as an issue. The things about DNA technology and so on, that's a laboratory issue and doesn't actually, you don't need to build that in a hospital. But obviously, the idea of understanding genetics in illnesses and medications is really important to us. It's part of having a good data system is to be able to use that. We will be, we keep doing what we call horizon scanning, looking for the latest treatments. There's surgical robots. So we'll have to, our theatres have to be big enough to cope with those. So in fact, currently surgical robots are not a lot different to surgeons. That's not good, but you know what I mean in terms of how well they work. But maybe in 10 years' time, surgical robots, run by surgeons, not just on their own, may actually prove to be better. So we have to have the space, and we talked earlier about space. When you move from a hospital built at the time of Dunedin Hospital as a clinician to a new hospital, you just get this amazing feeling of where did all this space come from? And we don't realise how confined we are, but we need that space to be able to do those new sorts of things. Because when Dunedin Hospital theatres were built, we didn't do endoscopic surgery. We didn't do laparoscopic surgery. So all that equipment has to be crammed in. So we are very thoughtful about what equipment will we need in a new theatre and a new ward.
Things like advances, there are places in the world that are 3D printing implants. We still get lots of cracks into them. And when and as you move and change, the dynamics of what you will need will change. So as Nigel pointed out, 12 years ago your smartphone didn't exist. And so think about the medical technology that hasn't been invented yet. That will be actually run of the mill by the time we open. Come to this lady here, and then we'll come back.
Oh, hi. Thank you. Very interesting. Thank you. I want to talk about the heritage facades for a moment, because it hasn't been raised yet, and I just see it as the chocolate chipping away at our heritage, I'm afraid. So has there been a proper detailed seismic assessment done on the facades? That's my first question, and I've got a little one for that up.
I don't know what a detailed seismic assessment means. You mean how readily would it fall over?
Yeah, well, it hasn't yet.
I think...
So has there been one done?
I'm not even sure that it's relevant. I think if you were going to build a hospital inside a facade, you'd build a hospital to IL4 standards, and then you'd attach what's left of the facade to it.
Yeah, because the facades are actually protected under the district plan.
We understand.
So
we understand the situation. We are. I had my first meeting with historic folk in May of last year. We're well familiar with the issues, and what we think will happen. So I'm not expecting you to be pleased about this. What we think will happen is that we will continue to get advice from engineers and architects, which is, do not attempt to build New Zealand's largest hospital inside an old chocolate factory. Instead, acknowledge the fact that it's not a smart idea to try and pull that off. We've had continuous advice that the dairy building, this one, is important to lots of folk, that end of it has just finished being refurbed. You've seen it, you know all about it. Cook Brothers have just finished it in the last few weeks. We currently own it, and we are pretty sure that we can build a hospital without pulling it down. And that's our current thinking and hope. For the rest of the facades, all the way down to here, we think we cannot build a hospital and retain those facades. We think that is, I wouldn't want to say impossible, but impracticable. So that's likely to be the advice we continue to
Are
get.
you getting some specialist advice on that, not just modernist architects though?
Oh yeah, we've John from the Ministry of Health, who's sitting down there, will tell you that we're in the market now for all manner of engineers, and they are coming on board in, from 1 to 3 months from now, and they will be put to work in the second phase of design, the so-called concept planning, and we think that they will end up giving us advice, which is, we're asking them a whole lot more questions than just the facade, but we think in the course of that concept planning, it will be reaffirmed that those facades should not hold, and at that point we'll go to a consent process, we'll seek a consent for their demolition. If that's what I think will happen.
What about the old psychiatric, the beautiful brick facade? The old psychiatric building?
It's in a different block.
That'll be a future
So it's going to stay there?
No, it's just that she's asking about Cadbury's, and the psychiatric building is a couple of blocks away.
But I'm asking that at the same time. Have you answered?
We haven't made decisions.
There's no decisions on that. It's not. There's no. So that's what I think will happen, and all I can do about that is tell you what I know, and if that changes, we'll tell you that too. But it's how it looks. Yeah.
To solve the problem of if the main hospital building was moved to the other side, to the Wilson block, would that mean that we don't have to demolish the Cadbury building? We could have the outpatients building going into the store, the Cadbury store area, and just move it one block, and we could use Cadbury building for other purposes, but doesn't need the main earthquake strengthening requirements. And there will be lots of other uses for the Cadbury buildings within the hospital aspects, and other buildings which are needed later can be probably used on the old hospital sites.
Okay, so that ship has sailed too. I'm about to tell you. And you should know that I thought the same as you did 6 months ago, and then we went through a process, as they call it, called site master planning, which went for about 15 weeks or something. I think it was 16 weeks. And at the end of that, a whole lot of people, me included, who thought that the big hospital might be able to be properly fitted on the north block, came to the view that it was better on the south. And if it were on the north block, so let's just play the game that what I thought and what you think were to play out, then we would still have to fit these sorts of facilities somewhere.
Yeah, they can go into the old hospital sites.
No, they can't, because you can't build a new hospital where the old hospital is, because the old hospital's there, and you can't stop having a hospital for a time.
No, but you can move. You build the new hospital first on the Wilson side, then move the hospital into the new side. Then you have an empty empty building.
That's true, you could do it that way.
And then you can use their building.
Yes, you could. Yes.
But there is proximity issues,
So-
particularly between the ambulatory outpatient building and the inpatient building. Important.
So what we did was that we looked at 100 different things. So, for example, this is the Otago Daily Times building, just as an example.
You wouldn't let me close it down.
And we had to be thoughtful about two things: whether or not us driving piles on that big building would stuff up the production of the daily newspaper around here, and secondly, whether the clunking or clonking of the presses would annoy the patients when it was built. Turns out none of those things are likely to be insurmountable, but we do have to have a gap because this will not be an IL4 building. And if it falls over, it'll hit us. This building won't fall over. IL4 means earthquake resistant. And I'm giving you that example about one building at one end of the site to give you some idea of the range of things that we had to think about. And when we'd done all that, it was very clear that it was pretty clear that the big building had to go south and shouldn't go north. I don't expect you to agree with me. I'm trying to tell you the process we went through.
But I just, like, Cadbury's is part of the Dunedin history. So, to me, it's part of an important part. Like, I'm trying to save some of the small buildings, and there's lots of other people trying to save the buildings. And here there's a hospital project that could be maybe thought of a little bit more clearly. I know you have done a lot of thinking about it, that maybe there's something that could save those buildings. Also, those buildings could be used in the building process for their contractors to have their offices, their car parking, their storage of materials.
I understand your point of view because I've seen you've written it down and I've seen it. You know, I understand your point of view quite well. It's just that it doesn't hold enough sway. It isn't important enough to switch the buildings around like that. And I'm sorry to give you that answer, but that's what I think is the situation.
Hi there, can you hear me? My name's John Marable. I've been involved with doing different audits on buildings with regards to accessibility around Dunedin and New Zealand. Got a few little questions, concerns and things. We're looking at access, the accessible journeys for me to get from home to the hospital. At the moment, because of the cycle lane, for example, we've lost accessible car parks in the system, in the street rather. Also, with the design of the, for want of a better word, the little islands between the existing parks and the pavement, or between the cycle lane, they could no longer use that because they're too narrow. There's 4 accessible car parks in Cumberland Street. They're not suitable, and people now having to get out of their wheelchairs to State Highway 1. These are sort of little concern that we want people to get to this new hospital. One question, is that going to be taken into consideration?
Certainly the comment about a parking plan means a parking plan that works for all, and accessibility does have to be factored into that equation. And so we will be taking those into account.
Because I mean, currently you've lost all these accessible car parks that could have been used by people who don't need specific mobility parks. They now are unable to get to the hospital. So
listen, mate. Let me just give you a couple more bits of information. I'm not saying car parking's fixed. I'm not at all sure whether it's fixed or not. But let me just tell you this. This is in a very low part of the city. So it's prone to flooding. The Leith's just up there, and it's all been widened and everything, but when you do that, you do the modelling around that. You do the modelling around climate change and the occasional storm surge, and on it goes. you've got yourself a building that we hope is going to last a long time, and it's going to get flooded at some point. Well, you can't have a hospital that's flooded, so we have to build it, not on the ground level, but 1.5 metres or something above ground level. And that's the beginning of an underground car park. So the current thinking is that we will probably put car parks under the main building, or maybe even under both. How many? Let's say 350. That's before the engineers come and steal them all for spare tanks for this or that, or whatever bits of plant they want to put down there. But let's say up to 350. So don't hold me to it, I'm just saying that's the figure, that's the number of cars you could put there if that's all you put there. The number of cars under this building here, because we've got a hospital already that's got an underground car park, is 100. So that's good. It doesn't mean that it's fixed. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be open to the public night and day, or managed in such a way. None of those decisions are taken. I'm simply trying to give you an idea that these things are addressable. And I've got one last thing to say about car parks. Before this hospital is done and dusted, we won't be needing too many car parks because we will have autonomous vehicles. And so we're going to have bits of vacant land all around the city that used to be car parks that are now being used for something else because we won't have as many cars
Hey,
on the
you're
road.
saying autonomous vehicles are coming in 20 years' time?
I know. I said before this is, before the life of this is over. Oh, I'm sorry, no, I meant before it's finished its life as an active hospital.
And I don't know about anyone else, but I hate parking underground in car parks with those big concrete poles. And so
We've got the roof.
We've got a question. With the microphone. We'll just move on to this person over here.
You've said that you're trying to get primary services out of the hospital. What are your plans for primary maternity service provision?
Look, we've been doing some work on that, and in fact today I've agreed that I get someone from the college of local college of midwives has been in contact with my chief nurse, I think, and with John Adams, who's the chair of the clinical leadership group. So we're going to meet with them. It is abundantly clear that for maternity services we need both a secondary facility and we need a primary facility. And the discussion and the debate about it at the moment has been about whether you have alongside primary maternity unit, which there's examples of that. Hawke's Bay have developed an alongside primary maternity unit, or whether we have a primary maternity unit that is completely divorced from somewhere else in Dunedin. We're in discussions. The clinical leadership group have articulated the importance that we don't just create one maternity unit and expect all women to be receiving the care within that one facility. So we're having the conversation and the discussion. At the moment, the leaning is towards an alongside primary birthing unit, which is well governed in terms of ensuring that it is retained as primary and that we don't have mixing with secondary and primary.
I know the hospital team is looking at the specifics of getting in and out of the building. And as I mentioned earlier, with the city and the regional council, collectively along with the hospital designers, and Pete mentioned before about engineers, well, they're getting a transport engineer on their side, so we'll be working very closely with them. So if we look at this road here, at the moment it's one way. And we can narrow that, we can make it more attractive as a one-way street, which will be, quite accessible in an emergency and so on. In terms of the strength of the pavements and so on underneath, parts of New Zealand, we actually put piles under motorways to make sure they will stand up. With regard to these streets, I don't know what they were built to. But, the hospital will stand. We will know that we'll be able to get people in and out with careful design, with walking, cycling, catching a bus. And as I mentioned before, this street and this street, we're looking at, could we make the two-way, what would the advantage be, what would the cost be, what would it mean for accessibility? If we left them one ways, what could we do to make them more attractive in terms of people who are walking and cycling? Because at the moment, when you come down here with the facade of Cadbury's, which I know is a historic facade, but between that and Countdown, it gives you very much a cannon effect, whereas the new hospital has got a wonderful opportunity at those ground levels to be more attractive as a place to walk into the hospital, catch up with your friends and so on. But also with traffic management in an emergency, you can very quickly get rid of ordinary traffic, and whether this was configured for one-way or two-way, make it accessible for emergency services. How do we know that? Because we know in Christchurch that was done. We know in Wellington it's going to be done, and we've just had an experience of that in Christchurch recently. Unfortunately, the tragedy that occurred there, but very quickly the public and the police were able to apprehend an offender on a main road. So I'm confident that by the time we've got to the final design here with this hospital, we'll have a better streetscape for people to be in. It'll be more accessible for anyone who wants to walk up, cycle up, catch a bus and drive, because there's a necessity for that as well. And one thing that hasn't come up tonight, which I would expect the hospital to have actually a transport management plan when this is finished. Now that's not just parking, that's how they actually operate this hospital for their staff, for people who are visiting, for patients. And there will be as an explicit traffic management plan or travel management plan, which will incentivise people who are able to walk and cycle and catch buses. For those who are not, they'll be able to get appropriate parking and access, including emergency vehicle access, which is critically important, i.e. ambulances. Now some of these conversations have happened already at a very high level, but now that we're getting down to, more moving from concept design to detailed design, and we've got our resources and their resources, I'm confident we'll get a good result for everybody here.
Certainly one of the critical things, I wouldn't be able to look at my chief medical officer if I didn't talk about the difficulties of being wedged between state highways, and that is a challenge. But regardless of what the outcome and what the solution is, the ease of ability for people of all modes, regardless of the status of roads outside, for vehicles, for bikes, and for pedestrians, and we see the importance of the link between the hospital and the CBD, both for our staff and also for our for all the visitors and patients that come to the facility.
Could I just make one final point? I'm sorry, but perhaps you might like to consider moving walkways and escalators for people who have mobility concerns, who can get up and go over the roads, and in fact travel right round the hospital on those particular ways. It would make it much easier for a lot of people who have mobility concerns, wheelchairs, you name it. Sorry, won't say anymore.
We've probably only got about another 5 minutes for questions, and then the rest of us can hang around to ask to talk informally. And then we'll come back to you.
Good evening. Has consideration been given to any green spaces within the hospital for the well-being of the patients who will want to have some green space, or maybe for an area for contemplation, or for children to play and just get some fresh air and greenery into their lives whilst they're receiving treatment?
Not much. I mean, a lot of consideration, but not much room. So the architects are quite imaginative, and they are quite thoughtful about doing quite a lot with what they've got. So what's not shown here is that this building is in two halves. Well, they're not even halves actually, but it's looking like there'll be a north-south corridor underneath the building, maybe. Please don't hold me to it. It's just trying to give you an idea. There's been no shortage of people who have been talking about rooftop gardens and the use of those things. There's the point that Jim made, which is that we've currently, I don't mean to be to offend you, ma'am, but we've currently got something that's very, very straight here, and we've got an ability to indent that and break things up a little. And in fact, in one set of drawings that I've seen, they're just, again, great works of New Zealand fiction. They're just really beginning things. The guy started with a bunch of tartan at the bottom of his drawing and carried the tartan feeling up and captured the essence of the various parts of the facade of Cadbury's in different heights, for example. It's really magic. And it's at the same time it breaks up this streetscape beautifully. You know, please don't think we're going to build anything like this. We just won't. And having said that, I started by saying, no, we don't have much space. Because no, we don't have much space. This is an inner city building. This is not Wakaru. And this is not a building that's going to have a lot of spare room for people to go walking in the garden. It just won't. So we need to be thoughtful about the limits on that. And I think probably we need to be thoughtful about that. I'm out of my depth here, but when we think about mental health and where that's going to live in the future, we need to be thoughtful about that.
I think the lady down here talked about at-grade car parking and pointed out the future space. And that will be a trade-off between actually, until we build those other buildings, do we put tar seal there to make car parks? We put green there. And they will be the sort of trade-off conversations that will be needed over the coming months.
I just sort of want to know, and you do know what I'm going to say, the art space, the space for the art.
Never get an art space.
Just before we all go home. Cheers, chaps. You know, the art space. Thanks, please.
So tell us who you are and...
I'm Barbara Brinsley, sir.
Yes, just tell everyone, Anne.
Well, I think you do know me. No, I won't take any more.
So there's a bunch of artwork in the current building, which is, I think, owned by, and in any case, guarded jealously by a trust that you lead, and there is some thought committee, and and so Barbara's interest is that we take into account the need to display these materials when we design the new hospital.
For the patients, for everyone. Thank you.
I mean, it is something to be proud of. And in terms of all the hospitals I've worked in, it's got the most extensive collection that I've been involved with. Sorry.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd just like to thank Jacinda Ardern for a start, for giving us this opportunity to build, the hospital here in Dunedin, and finally we're getting something. And I'm born and bred in Dunedin. I've worked in construction most of my life, and I'd just like to get back to you, Pete, where you talk about the labour to build this thing, and I think that's what you need to look at the start, because it's never going to get out of the ground. And I think you have to plan more about doing that, is getting the labour force to be able to build this, and look at how you would do that. And I think subcontracting and getting people from overseas to build it won't work. And I look back at my time where I worked in Twizel and worked on the hydro schemes, and I worked on Clyde Dam, and a lot of that stuff was Ministry of Works built, and it's like they are a huge feat to build those projects, and they work so well, and the whole thing works so well, and but it was set up right. And I look at the 10 years it's going to take to build this hospital, that's what you're talking about, and I think you need to look more at the apprenticeships system and how you would set that up to get the labour force to build this hospital.
let me just give you a couple, we're getting towards the end of the evening, but let me just give you a couple of minutes to cover a tiny number of points about the labour stuff. We've got a group of people, it's actually mainly the Ministry of Social Development, the Dunedin City Council and the Otago Chamber of Commerce, with a bit of help from Shane Jones's money, which we think will get confirmed later this month, will be looking at the capital projects in the Greater Dunedin or even the wider, the entire Otago area. I'm not sure whether to include Queenstown or whether it doesn't need to be included. Out beyond this hospital, out beyond 2028, because what's going to happen is that when this hospital starts getting underway, a lot of other capital works are going to down tools, because we will be putting up the price of labour, because we'll be soaking up all of the resources. And when we finish building the hospital, a lot of people are going to pick up the tools again. An obvious example being the University of Otago. And we're going to be able to map that way beyond 2028, out towards 2033, 2038 even, and then say to people at Logan Park, look guys, we've got 15 or 20 years of capital activity in this town that we haven't seen in recent decades. Don't feel that you're going to just build a hospital and go on the dole. It's going to be bigger and brighter than that. So that's us better getting an idea of what the demand for labour is. There's another committee, of course. There are always committees comprised of the private sector, this electrician, this plumbing company, these construction companies, this polytechnic, corrections, for example, the Ministry of Education, a whole group of people, again, gathered to start to think around the supply of labour. And either today or soon, I'm not sure what happened today, but very soon we'll be appointing a coordinator. We have the money to appoint a coordinator for a period of time, and that person is going to start to rattle around the schools and around the various places to try and work up a bit of enthusiasm. But wait, there's more. If you're an electrician, it doesn't make sense to train 3 times the number of apprentices that you would normally train in case you get work at the hospital, because you may not. And so there's a few tricks to be pulled. One of them I tried to explain before, where if we do have an Australian involvement, they will need to pre-train or think about pre-training in Dunedin if they're going to be serious about picking up the job. Another one is that you and I form the company that does no more than train electrical apprentices, and we take 30 on our books and we farm them out around the province, and we take responsibility for their well-being and their training, etc., along with the Polytechnic. And then when they're finished, they get a job with whoever does win the contract, so that you don't oblige the person, you don't oblige the current electrical company to do it. You have some other group, a third party. And that's now government policy. And you and I get, when we form a company, we get assisted in doing that. So those are just a couple of tricks I'm offering up to give you some insight into the depth of analysis that's going on and the depth of thinking. It's a really serious issue, and we need to be very serious in addressing it.
Right. Last question. No, there's 2 questions. Last question, Corona, name yourself.
So artwork is important, and so is parking, but so is mental health.
Okay.
Now currently our mental health system is still not electronic. Do we have to wait 10 years until this hospital is finished for our mental health records to be on par with our general health record keeping system?
The answer is no.
So when?
The answer is no, when we talk about, we've talked about the digital hospital, but we're talking about the digital health system. And there's no reason why the mental health records should be an integrated part of the health record. Like every service, there's challenges around appropriate privacy, etc. But equally, we need to make it integrated.
Right now, GPs do not get notified if somebody presents to EPS, unlike with a general health condition. So we were promised actually that Southern DHB would go electronic with mental health records, I think, probably 2 years ago. That never happened.
Just to answer that, a proportion of the records are electronically available as they are for the general service, but a smaller proportion. You're exactly right. We have to find ways of making sure we get everything included, and we're moving from old paper systems and old electronic systems, trying to bring them together. It's a complicated issue, but I take your point. We have to work harder and smarter to bring these things together. Also to bring people with us, because we do have, and I accept your view, we do have some people who feel that mental health records are so private we should not be going electronic. So we have
good reason.
Yeah, I understand the reasons, but we have to work out how we can bring them together and bring those people along with us.
Okay, last question.
When you're in hospital,
Yep.
one of the important things is food. Is Compass going to spring joyfully in the digital era, or have you got a kitchen in there?
There are kitchen facilities in there. Obviously, we have a contract with Compass for 15 years.
How many more?
12.
That's a long time to stay sane.
Yeah, I would point out though the feedback on food is definitely improving overall, and inevitably there will always be many opinions on food, but it has definitely improved from where it started.
Thank you all for coming this evening, and both Pete and Chris have really reaffirmed our intention to really make this a regular event and a regular occasion on which we can update you as we move through the process. Chris also commented on the fact that you have the opportunity really to record contact details if you would like a continuing involvement and update in the process. That involved the opportunity for further input into the role of the Community Health Council. I think I've covered all of those matters, Nicola.
So look, I'll put the list out just by where the tea and coffee was, and basically it's mainly a list for people who want to be mainly a list for people who want to receive like updates via a newsletter, but also if you would like to be an advisor through the Community Health Council and potentially be involved in one of the particular work streams, I have quickly created an extra column where you can give that a tick and then that will be noted too. And you can maybe note any particular area of interest that you have as well.
Okay. Thank you all for coming this evening. We will provide further opportunities to engage similarly. Thank you.